In healthcare, what fascinates me the most is how do we get this interaction between the front of house for the patient with the back of house efficiency for the doctors and the staff that runs the place, without making the workflows easy enough for the patients where they can find stuff easily without getting stressed out. They're already in a stressful situation, so how can I make them move through the space without really telling them where to go, but subtly guiding them through design cues and kind of just getting them through, and then making that provider flow that they are on target, on point, moving a patient from one room to the other, getting that all going. How do we make that flow for them efficient? So that's kind of usually what I personally strive on, trying to get that through design. And then while we're doing that, we kind of implement design soothing palettes and some subtle design cues, easy wayfinding stuff that helps them ease and navigate the space better.
Yeah. Make sure that, like you said, those patients that are coming in feel comfortable without even noticing because you can tell the difference, right? For a clinic that's kind of outdated, it's just been sitting there for 20 years. And then when we go in and have you guys redesign it and we're building it out, and when it's completely said and done with, it's just such a difference. Okay, welcome to another episode of Blueprints to Punch List. Today we have Swap and John from Groh Architecture, and as usual, my co-host Ken Fulmer here.
Yeah.
Welcome, guys. How's it going today?
Great. Happy to be here.
Yep. Same here.
It's
Love the drive to Orlando, so it's fun.
Yeah, that's a brutal drive sometimes, isn't it?
It was good in the morning. It was
Was it?
actually not that bad today, and he did most of the driving, so
There you go.
it was easy for me.
Makes it even better.
You know what I just saw yesterday, in fact, on somebody's Instagram post from Tampa, that I-4 and I-75 corridor, like an average of like 34 hours of time that gets wasted if you drive that every day, like in a year.
Actually, more than that in a year.
Yeah.
I think it's an under.
Yeah, I counted my commute time, dropping kids up and whatever, and it's probably almost like a month in a year that I'm on the road.
Yeah, I think Tampa just made the list of most inefficient traffic-wise terms of
Hey, we got a better airport.
time wasted. Oh, that's very true.
Well, that's why we need to make our buildings efficient to compensate
There
for
you go. There you go.
the
for the time
traffic.
in traffic. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can help a little bit on that front.
Yeah, so Tampa is a great city, though. I always enjoy going there, visiting, and you guys are based out of Tampa. So thank you for making the drive and coming up here.
Well, like I tell people in the Orlando metro area, Orlando is part of Central Florida. So in 30 years, I've crossed over 2,000 times. So I always tell Orlando metro clients and business acquaintances that it's pretty much local. It takes me the same time to get here than to go to Clearwater Beach or Sarasota. So it's really not only for work, but for play. I do take advantage of the whole Central Florida spectrum on a weekly basis, which makes it great because there's so much variety.
Yeah.
So no, it's an everyday occurrence.
Yeah.
Nice.
And here soon, I think it'll ultimately all blend into one metro area, right?
Yep.
Tampa.
And then
Orlando.
once the Bright Line gets that extension to Tampa, that will be a
Well, by
game
the time
changer.
that happens, it's still
I
gonna
hope
take
it happens
a while,
really
but,
soon, but yeah, it'll be fun.
It'll be nice when it's here.
For sure.
Well, we'll look back on this episode in a couple of years when it's all said and done, talking about the Bright Line. But before we jump into what you guys do and your backgrounds and all that, we always like to have just a recent, have you guys share a recent win that you had? It could be business, family, health, just anything that comes to mind.
Well, I'm pretty excited about a deal I just snagged recently in Hard Rock, the cafe, the hotel over here. And we're going to spend a whole long weekend in Universal with my 2 teenage daughters and my best friend. We are all Harry Potter fanatics, so can't wait for that.
Awesome.
So
That'll be cool.
it'll be cool.
Yeah. Have you guys been?
I've been in 2019 was the last, so it'll be, kids were young then. They still were all into Hogwarts, and then we went off the Harry Potter drive for a little bit for Disney and Mickey Mouse, but they're back now and so much into it through Christmas break that it was a great win that we got it's actually coming up in a couple of weeks, so awesome. I'm looking forward to that.
That'll be fun. Yeah, my older one is really into Harry Potter, so I can appreciate that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep.
Well, for me personally, like many people in our area, our house was victim of Hurricane Helene. It got flooded, so it was a total loss, which we were about to remodel. And thankfully, because of the calamity tax exception, we're able to get our taxes grandfathered in and do new construction, which I didn't think I was ever going to do. I've done a lot of family members and friends' personal homes, so I get to go back and live in those. But I thought I would never experience going through a complete new house for my own self. And we are applying for permit this Friday. So awesome. It's a huge win in the middle of busy to get it done this quick. And so super excited and nervous about it. And so I can be on the client side and give my own pep talks like a gift to clients, given to myself. But hopefully it's a great opportunity.
And you designed the house,
yes.
I'm guessing?
Yes.
Absolutely.
How was that?
I tried to have him hire an architect, and he said no.
He knows somebody.
He did know somebody.
The example I usually give clients is, I'm a chair fanatic. I can probably tell you the names of most chairs in the last 100 years from a design perspective. So when it came down
chairs as in
sitting chair. Yeah.
Wow. That's a niche within a niche.
Yeah. So when it came down to select what dining room chairs, I mean, when I did my own home design in school, a 2-story wall was going to be just an exhibit of chairs on the wall. So it's always been a thing. So when it came down to, okay, I need to get a dining chair for myself, it was just so complicated, because do I go with something that's classic? Do I go with a new design? But I'm always a proponent for design, but I do always like to say how you have to practice what you preach. So I just melded a new design that's not necessarily referential. But so I chose to go with a new design that's extremely comfortable and very practical, and beautiful. So it achieved all 3 things. But it took me about 10 years to make that choice. So that's why a big win was to be able to design a house from scratch, essentially in 8 weeks. Was a bit of a feat. So, and I'm not looking back. It's done, and now it's just executing. So,
and from permit, ready to go.
Ready to go.
Awesome.
I got so many questions about chairs right now.
We'll have a podcast just on chairs. An
that
episode.
will be a separate episode of its own, because I've never even thought that was like a segment of something that.
Well, architecturally, like probably one of the most iconic chairs. It's called the Barcelona chair. It was in the World Fair Pavilion in Barcelona. It was designed by Mies van der Rohe, who was a very modernist architecture, and he's credited with the quote of "less is more" that a lot of people may have heard. And it's a beautiful chair. It's a little low, and it's a lounge chair, so it could be a little difficult to get in and out. But the pavilion itself, it was just a concrete and glass room, and it just had a couple chairs and the table. So it's a very almost sterile, but it's just totally beautiful. And it's from the 50s, and you still see it today, and it's been copied in a lot of different ways. But there's a rich tradition of architects designing chairs, and in many cases they're not that comfortable. And in some cases, I do see them as it's just a sculpture. It's not meant to be sat on. It's meant to be looked at. Right. You may feel the urge to sit down because it looks like a chair, but it's really you just sit down for the experience, but you really couldn't sustain any activity while sitting in.
Let's
that
just say we
particular
won't
chair.
have it in any of our healthcare spaces.
Yeah.
We will not.
It's not very
Yeah.
warm and
Nope.
welcoming.
Yeah.
But enough.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, John. We've known each other for going back about 5-6 years now. I don't
Probably
think-
more.
Probably more.
Well, with Wilson, me
Yeah.
and you guys personally, but
Okay.
yeah, with Wilson, it's been a much longer
Yep.
relationship.
Mhm.
But I never knew about the chair.
I'm sure there's a lot of
Interesting. Cold.
facets of design where you can kind of get into the real nitty gritty of it, which is cool. Which is, I have a big respect for what you guys do, because it's challenging to be able to envision something, kind of put it all together and make it all cohesive, which you guys do pretty well.
Well, I mean, I personally have a lot of respect for almost every profession, because I love the fact that we're all different. There's a lot of things I would not want to do, and there's a lot of things I would not be good at.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I say we have the easy job. We just draw.
Yeah.
You'll build. You'll make it happen. It's easy for me to draw that line. It was so simple. Go ahead, figure it out, and build it now. How'd you feel?
How did you guys get started in your careers in architecture, and maybe just give us a brief
Good.
kind
No,
of
you
background?
start, John.
Well, I was born and raised in Mexico, and in different to the college system of the U.S., it seems, you fill your application and there's this line where you have to put what profession you want to learn. And it was the day before the deadline. I was toying between psychology, business, and I was curious about architecture. And I figured, well, if I do psychology, every time I talk to somebody, they're going to think I'm psychoanalyzing them. So that's not going to be, I don't know. I didn't seem weird, even though I'm fascinated by human behavior. And then I figured, well, if I go for psychology and it doesn't work out, I could always have a business. If I do architecture and it doesn't work out, I could always have a business. And if I do business and it doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I decided for architecture, not really knowing all that it entailed. It was not I didn't grow up with anybody in my family. But there was a lot of art. So I think that was probably the vehicle that got me into it. And the more I discovered it, the more of a nerd I became. And I just absolutely, 35 years later, I think it was an absolute great decision, because this morning, I mean, I'm still thinking of clients and challenges, and it still feels like I'm just beginning.
Yeah.
So
it's a love, not a.
Well, I mean, we
it is
do.
work,
We spend most of our awoken or
but
our wake time doing what we do. So you have to. There has to be more than just checking off the task. You got to be passionate about it. But I do consider myself lucky in that I get to, particularly within architecture, I get to practice the aspects of architecture that I like the most. So
Yeah.
I consider myself very lucky for that.
Labor of love.
I'm sorry?
Labor of love. You kind of get to do
Yeah.
this work, but you get to do what you enjoy and what you
I mean, you go
into.
through challenges every day, and it's overcoming those challenges. It's no different than a design challenge. So you never know exactly I never know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow or next week. So you just kind of discover it day by day.
Awesome.
How about you, Swap?
Mine wasn't as fascinating as that, right? Growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor, and that was the path, following in my parents' footsteps. Just came from a family with both doctors, and that's what we're going to do. And then as it came time from 12th grade, when I had to make the decision and go to the major, get the medical major, I'm like, I don't think I want to study for that long. It's going to be medicine and then postdoc and whatever. So let me just be an interior designer, because I like some art and whatever. So I'm like, okay, let me try that. And my dad goes, well, can you please at least try a professional degree and think about architecture then? So I'm like, can I have you talk to a couple people? Because he couldn't wrap his head, being an Indian parent, that I'm not going to do anything besides medicine and engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I'll talk to some family, friends, their kids were doing architecture. So I spoke with them and I said, okay, I can do that, try that. I actually enjoy it now that I get to wear so many different hats, because you touch so many professions and so many different aspects of projects and, clients. But I also tell my siblings who are doctors that, hey, I am still in the family business because I do the back end.
Right, right.
So in a way, it worked
the
out.
place for the doctors to operate, right?
Exactly,
and work and see patients.
Yep. Or I just grew up in hospitals and grew up in India. You would like back and forth, like we'd be ready early for school instead of waiting for the bus stop. We'd be waiting in the hospital, maybe in the pharmacy, reading out prescriptions and helping them in the back. What are you doing? So I would go with my mom for blood camps. So there's that affinity already there.
Right.
But again, it was just that I didn't want to be in college for 10 years. I probably did that with the masters and everything else that I had to do and make way less money than a doctor would have. So in the end, I don't know if that was a great decision, but I enjoy what I do. So that definitely is great.
Makes a big difference in the day-to-day.
Yep.
And you mentioned you enjoy what you do, but you're also very good at what you do. There's been many times where we've had projects that we're working on and we're like, all right, we got to call Swap to find out what's the answer to this. How do we get around that? What can we do here? And you're always very knowledgeable with that. So we definitely appreciate that from our perspective on the construction side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's very humbling to hear that. Thank you. Yeah. I strive to do what I know and, learn more every day. So definitely good.
And the design component, you guys do a good job at the overall design and aesthetic. And, I got to a point where I could almost tell. There was a site in Sun City we did a couple of years ago and walked in and I go, you know what? I think I know who designed this, checked with the guy, and it was you all that did the original build.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over there. I forget exactly where it was, but it was in Sun City in a shopping center over there.
Probably at JSA.
I think it was the JSA Sun City Center. I remember that project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys do a lot of healthcare and have done a lot of healthcare in the past and still to this day, the healthcare medical side. You guys share just a little bit about that process of designing a healthcare or a medical space versus, some of the other projects, maybe a residential or other type of other type of buildings you guys work on.
Well, when people think of design and particularly architecture, there's always the perception that it's an aesthetic process. That when we look in particularly at healthcare, it can be seen as a little bit of a frivolous effort, to try to make a space attractive. But that's just the beginning of it all. And particularly in healthcare, there's so much that goes into the design of a facility. It's got to function at every level, so that the design process is to solve a particular set of scope of work, or what we define as the problem, and finding that solution in a healthcare space. It's not just an aesthetic component. There's the function and the I got lost there. Sorry. So hopefully that. But what the main point to drive is how. It's a lot of responsibility to know that the ultimate user is going to potentially be at this facility in what could be a trying time. So making it work at all levels, but particularly focusing on that responsibility of how to ensure that their personal outcome within the space and in their visit is going to be a positive one that comes with a lot of responsibility on our end.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to add to it. Like what I think of architects is we are problem solvers, right? And every project comes with its own unique set of problems attached to it. In healthcare, what fascinates me the most is how do we get this interaction between the front of house for the patient with the back of house efficiency for the doctors and the staff that runs the place without making the workflows easy enough for the patients where they can find stuff easily without getting stressed out. They're already in a stressful situation, so how can I make them move through the space without really telling them where to go, but subtly guiding them through design cues and kind of just getting them through, and then making that provider flow that they are on target, on point, moving a patient from one room to the other, getting that all going. How do we make that flow for them efficient? So that's kind of usually what I personally strive on, trying to get that through design. And then while we're doing that, we kind of implement design soothing palettes and some subtle design cues, easy wayfinding stuff that helps them ease and navigate the space better.
Yeah. Make sure that, like you said, those patients that are coming in feel comfortable without even noticing because you can tell the difference, right? For a clinic that's kind of outdated, it's just been sitting there for 20 years. And then when we go in and have you guys redesign it and we're building it out, and when it's completely said and done with, it's just such a difference. Yep,
absolutely. There's a delicate balance that we got to provide there between, how do you make this clean, sterile environment that healthcare demands, but yet make it warm and inviting and calming.
Yeah.
That definitely, you got to strike that balance there for healthcare. It's unique.
Yeah.
And, kind of bring some hospitality experience in it to make you feel like, because if you walk in a space and it's dirty and dingy, it automatically throws you off. If it's crowded, if it's old, so that is, I think, in healthcare, in today's world, is getting more and more important.
Yeah, sounds like functionality obviously is paramount, for both patients and staff, but creating a warm environment, I think, is right there with it, right? And you said something about kind of bringing the hospitality aspect into healthcare, and I've been reading a lot lately of folks, and I fully agree with it, folks trying to bring that hospitality aspect into healthcare, into the clinics, because like you said, it's a trying time. They're not there because they want to be there. Exactly. Typically going through something that is causing a lot of stress. So the easier, or I guess the warmer you can make that environment, the better.
And luckily, the industry has followed that trend in the last 10 years of becoming more of a host to the patient as opposed to just a professional.
Right. With having these activity rooms and yoga classes and bingo, and it is become that center of where seniors in many cases can go and have these options, and not just seniors really, but everybody having those options and a place to come that's welcoming. Because at the end of the day, when it comes back to human nature, we want to be able to connect with others, right? We want to feel connected, and so many times these patients, they are disconnected because the only time they get out of the house is when they go to their doctor and go see just these appointments, because they don't have family. Many of them don't have family around, so it is important to not show up into this just old, outdated,
crowded
kind of
place,
like
dark,
dingy.
Right? Yep.
Well, from a business standpoint, it is competitive. So that's forcing the industry to always think of ways to better the client's experience, and that continues to come through.
And we are very customer service society these days. You'll have Google reviews and you'll have somebody saying something right away or posting on Instagram or Facebook. So it is important to keep our clients
relevant.
Yep.
Yeah, the information's readily available, right? And snap of a finger. So in your collaboration with kind of healthcare clients, healthcare companies, what is kind of your process to get on paper what they're looking for? does it all start with, all right, how many providers, and then we build around that? That's very oversimplified, I'm sure, but what does your guys' process kind of look like? How do you start that?
How do we start it? We listen.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the first
Great
problem
answer.
solvers.
Yes.
We listen. So the first step always is trying to talk to the providers and their key personnel and seeing what are their needs, like you said, exam rooms and whatnot, and just kind of being able to help them get it out on a paper, and then we can help them analyze, what their the wants and the needs and the relationships are, and just putting it down, asking them what their past experiences are from their previous places or whatever, and what do they envision having in their new space. Again, just don't be shy, just talk.
Right.
Nothing at that point is unachievable. It's just telling us whatever thoughts you have. Once we have that, basically at that point, once we get the relationships done, it's all established. At that point, all we have to do is solve the problem. Like I said earlier.
Right.
And we always think, or we'd like to think that we take care of our clients' clients. That's something that we try to follow through on the fact that even though our client may be the particular healthcare provider, we're looking to their clients to make sure that we're thinking about the end user, because a positive experience is only going to benefit the healthcare provider to begin with. So from that standpoint, we do, since we do this day in, day out, we do try to bring all the collective experiences we've had with the different types of healthcare operations or disabilities or different circumstances, and bring all that experience to specific providers to collaborate with them and find what's going to work best for them and their clients.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Build for or design for your clients' clients.
Correct.
Ultimately, that's who's using it, right? It makes a whole lot of sense.
How does it differ from working with a group that's, maybe they have, 10 or 15 locations versus somebody that's brand new? Like, how does that approach?
It does differ in a way, like I was saying earlier, if they have any experience or not. So if they already have some locations, we still like to go see and walk those locations in person and walk with the office manager, walk with the provider, try to find a time where we're not disturbing their everyday process, but almost like walk me through like a patient walks through. So we'll see what they see and also see what happens as the inner workings that are going on over there, right? So if they have those previous locations, they can tell us what works for them and what doesn't. Sometimes that's just as important as finding out what works, because a couple of our clients, they loved their check-in, check-out flow, but they just did not like how the clients moved through diagnostics. And we were like, okay, just let us know what's not working so we can resolve that or try to figure out a different way of it. If they don't have any prior locations, what I think we bring to the table is our experience with other facilities and throughout the years that we have worked with. And we are able to kind of guide them through a little bit through design, like sinks and exam rooms. How many exam rooms do you need? Is the waiting plenty or enough or not? How many patients are going to circle and cycle through in a day? Just those kind of questions that they might not think about, either letting the architect know. We ask questions, and you guys know I ask.
They don't even know that they need to be asking.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And you know me, I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No,
and so also me growing up, on a personal note, growing up with a family with doctors, our dinner table talks used to be that, right? How did the surgery go, or what happened? Were they running late for this or that? That just helps have an inside perspective to what the providers may want or think. Like, hey, do you want sometimes a backdoor approach because you are running late in a surgery? Some, life-threatening event happened or whatever. They're not there on their own accord. They're late, but it's a very demanding profession.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So definitely we got to allow for those things and still see how we can move. So that having that, I guess, a connection, I kind of, I don't know, not empathize, but I kind of connect with them, the providers, easily on that sense, on a personal level, just growing up around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you some of the insight.
Yeah.
Connecting, listening, understanding, and that's what, like, to your point about customer service, it does go back to that, because these doctors are serving patients and people who are, like I said, often they're coming in when they don't want to be seeing doctors. So how do you make that more of a comfortable overall environment? So no, I do like that. And I mean, around that though, as far as challenges within designing healthcare, because we do have some additional regulations we have to be aware of. But how does that, some of these challenges to overcome, like how do you just think about, like, you mentioned before, right? Because you've done so many of these primary care type facilities, you just know what's going to be, what they're going to need before they even know it, or some things to consider, like the sinks. There's always a toss up. We see good amount of clinics with sinks, good amount of clinics without them.
Sinks.
And like on the construction side, there's an added cost, because now you got to have a sanitary line and somewhere
Sock up
for
the
that
slab
sink.
and trench it.
So those are the things. But what are some of the other challenges that you may see during designing healthcare that they might just, not even, some of these doctors not even be aware of as they're thinking about it?
I think from our standpoint is trying to keep everything in the right balance, to not overcompensate on one side, on the clinical side or the hospitality side. We have to keep everything going at a parallel level, both from a functioning aspect, the look and feel, and then all the regulations that you mentioned that do come with it. So it's mostly always keeping everything on check to make sure that everything is progressing in the at the same time, and we're not overlooking, or we're not so the client doesn't overlook one thing over another or get distracted by one aspect of it and ignore the other. So we keep bringing everything to stay to develop the project at all fronts.
Yeah, and that, architectural clues that we use for that, we kind of use well-lit open spaces, wider hallways, seamless floors. We could use touchless hardware and surfaces that can deter the growth of microbes, frequent air changes. All of these elements kind of help with the ICRA regulations and the ADA accessibility codes. And we also have to worry about sound insulation, small things as lag for all the HIPAA privacy concerns that might be there. But again, without making them hurdles in design, without making them obviously stand out, still having an open plan, because we said earlier we want to have these hospitality looks, open fields, trying to calm them down. So those points help out in that, we still try to navigate those regulations while providing a warm and welcoming design. Like I said earlier about how do we not make it look sterile? How do we not make it look too sanitary? Yes, these spaces need to be wiped down with bleach wipes, but it doesn't need to look like that.
Right.
How do we still soften it?
Right.
But you mentioned that facility in Sun City, and that was some time ago, but that was sort of a turning point in that time where we started seeing the more hospitality driven breakdown of spaces and moving people through a general waiting area to then subsequent areas and more of a concierge type service. So you still have all the privacy regulations, but it's more how do we not alienate you by putting screens between each check-in, check-out counter. So we do it in a way where we turn that into a design feature, and you think it's just, oh, this looks interesting, cool,
there,
or whatnot, and you may not even think of the fact that it's actually there to provide privacy. So we try to pivot and make it not distract you or deceive you, but disguise in a way that it's seen as an actual plus or a contributor to the overall feel of the space, when it's actually a very practical use. So it's kind of turning it into a design feature.
Yeah, and I guess there's certain thresholds, right? And I think one of the big thresholds is procedures, right? If a procedure was to be taking place in a certain room, all of a sudden you have these different boxes you have to check. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like primary care, typical use of primary care without procedures usually keeps them under that threshold where
Absolutely.
it's really
You're not an ACA facility unless you have, surgery centers in there and the class A, B, and C. So it's much different. A lot changes with that little checkbox there.
Right.
If you're not going to be licensed by ACA, there's a different set of standards. You still have all of the building code requirements, the fire safety regulations, and the safety standards that are not required by building code or a governing body like ACA for on the design side.
Right.
But the provider still has to,
Yep.
like the HIPAA regulations and patient safety, risk assessment. So they still, and infection control, they have those elements even in a non-ACA facility. How do you take care of your biohazard waste?
Right.
Certain doctors don't think about that. Like if you ask a provider, the provider might not know that because that's not what they see. The staff takes care of that, right? So usually from a program requirement, those items are missing, especially like when you were asking for some facilities that don't have the experience. If you have a new provider that wants to start up a practice and doesn't have the history or a facilities department behind them, we have to help them assist. Hey, you're going to need a janitor closet. You're going to need a biohazard closet. You're going to need an IT closet. You're going to need an alcove to store wheelchair.
Right.
Just small things that, don't go by them as like they go with us because we've in and out. That's our profession. We are in and out of those things every day. So that part, like John was saying, how do we use those design challenges and not let the end user feel there were design challenges? We disguise them, and so that it gets hidden in the design. You don't realize, and that's one of those best design is where you don't see any of that struggle happening, right? Where it falls into place and it looks right.
Yeah. Like to your point, the separators or the dividers on the reception, making them.
But I think everybody has been to a facility where you walk in and there's never a good space for the wheelchairs.
Yes.
They seem like an imposition, and it almost feels like, well, I have a visible wheelchair because I have to, and again, it feels like it's in a way that they're checking the box. But if I go to a facility that allows for wheelchair access in and out and proper storage, where it's not glaring at me, I don't have to be challenged or intimidated by staring at a wheelchair. But if somebody needs it, it's
there.
right
It's
there.
there.
So you just don't notice it, and I don't get distracted by it. But it's they're very, very, very small nuances, but they do make, when you combine all of them together, they really start to make a difference.
And it doesn't clutter your hallways then, so you're not blocking your fire exits. You're still not letting the patient coming in feel like, oh my God, that's a cluttered space, So again, it's subtle cues. It's not really one thing that you do, and it's not, it's just a well-planned facility when you think about all the minor details.
Right. Combination of everything involved, kind of, and a lot of it is, seemingly unseen by the doctors, felt when it's not there, but unseen.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
Yeah. And, the one thing that comes with some of these implications is the cost that often doctors don't, or these providers don't think about when they're, looking at all the things that they want to add to the clinic and all these implications that they don't even know. It's them just like, yeah, can we turn this room into can we add an exam room here? Well, or can we turn this into some different part of space without realizing all the things that will go into, and that's what when we get Swap on the phone or John on the phone with them, we're quickly realizing that, hey, there's different things you got to account for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but yeah. So, do you guys have a favorite project or something that was really unique in that healthcare space that you worked on in the past?
Well, do you have a favorite child?
Well,
there's always
all the same, right?
I have a favorite 8-year-old and a
Yes.
favorite 4-year-old.
There you go. Well, what I said at the beginning, that it still feels like we're just beginning in a way 35 years later. You always encounter challenges with every particular project, no matter the scope, no matter the size. And usually the more difficult the challenge, the more we have to really think about it. And in order to provide an answer that, like what Swap mentioned, where you don't even know there was a struggle there. So one that comes to mind, it's a healthcare provider. They relocated all their corporate offices, like 5 different offices, into one corporate center by the airport in Tampa. So it was a building from the 80s. And I mean, they leased, I don't know, it was 80, 90,000 square. So it was a big facility. But the lobby is the main entrance to this big corporate center was 9 feet tall. So how do you convey we're a major healthcare player with that particular challenge? So that occupied our minds. Again, this is nothing to do with a clinical space, but within the breadth of a healthcare company. And what resulted is we pretty much try to make the ceiling go away by providing, it's like a canvas you stretch, and it's essentially light gets projected into it. So the entire ceiling, edge to edge of this entire lobby, which leads you to a 3rd floor reception, but the entire ceiling is lit. And then we turned that also into the last couple feet of the walls. So your horizon line where you walk into the space is at eye level, and then the walls and the ceiling sort of blend and they kind of disappear. And it was really effective. When people visit, you don't even think of the fact that it's a condensed space, and it creates a great first impression and that corporate image that they were looking for. So that was a complete surprise. When we first walked in, it's how do we deal with this? So things of that nature I find particularly satisfaction in the result being something that,
because that is pretty unique. You gotta
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
You gotta come up with some creative solutions on some of these design challenges, especially in existing spaces.
Yeah, you can have your bag of tricks, but you do get hit with new challenges every day, and that certainly keeps us on our toes. But that's what I particularly enjoy.
Well, that's what you just said. Designing for existing spaces. I think most of the challenges you and I have faced during constructions is because we're going in these existing spaces and building, with a neighbor that may or may not work, or somebody above us, somebody below us. I could talk about the MRI, 3 Tesla MRI that had to go in a building, and it was a 5-story building with all glass cladding, and we had to figure out where to get the quench vent. We can't run it 5 stories up to the roof. So that was complex. I had an X-ray machine that was going to go on a working restaurant, and we had to strengthen the floor while they were not in business. So we could talk about that. But my favorite one in the recent ones is the small project that was for a doctor's office. They owned 1,500 square feet, and their practice was growing, that they want to expand into the neighboring suite another 1,000 square feet. Tiny project, right? But they want to stay operational throughout.
That always makes it more fun.
It was challenging at least, right? So the way we designed it was the first 1,000 square feet they're going to expand into, we provided a waiting area, reception, exam rooms, a restroom, a break room, and a tiny hallway. Everything where we built it out, we got a CO, we moved them in it. They function out of those 2 exam rooms, a tiny waiting room and a check-in desk that's sitting on a table. But then we moved into the 1,500 square feet, completely gutted, built it out, additional exam rooms, expanded the waiting area, expanded the, designed the reception in a way where the desk just slides back. And well, again, so we built everything in that space up to the connection points. And the last, on a 4-day weekend, the contractor, again, this was a synchronized dance between the architect owner and the contractor, right?
Yeah.
How to move and how to place them
right?
and whatnot. But the last, on a 4-day weekend, they punched out the 2 openings that connected the 2 suites where the hallway connected. We had the flooring and ceiling planned in a way that it just looked designed. The pattern flew and merged into.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 2 different colored tiles, LVTs, that just matched up. So it didn't matter that it was exact seam or, didn't look like it was added on. And the doctors were so happy because their services were not disrupted. Like I told you, the design aspect took long just to understand how do I make it work every time, because the lab that I'm providing here is not the actual lab. The actual lab is going to be later on.
Yeah.
But they need something to stay operational.
They needed operational.
So how many phases was that? Was that at least 2 or 3?
It was so what we called it was phase 1, a CO, phase 2, a TCO, and then a phase 2B, which was punching the openings out. And we worked with the contractor, actually worked very closely with the city there, where they were able to, I think they took a Monday off or something, and they lined up all the inspections. So most of the MEPs, the way we designed it, we keep the MEPs separate.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to do any of those inspections. So the only building inspector had to come in and fire had to come in to check if the flow worked out now and the egress worked out. But yeah, out of, 200 odd medical offices I've done, that 2,500 square feet space was the most challenging.
Yeah, it's almost like the more complicated ones, albeit in the moment, do not feel like, kind of the favorite ones or the best ones. But looking back, some of the most challenging projects I've done are my favorite projects.
The complex ones.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember that project. I remember it started as, we're just expanding the practice. And Swap came back and we, talked about it. But then in a subsequent meeting, you came back, well, they actually want to stay operational the whole time. And you were just saying it's not possible.
Yep.
And the doctors or the practice insisted it's like, we don't have an option.
Mm-hmm.
So
Can't
then,
close for 2 months.
So then that's where the
construction.
panic button got hit. And now you're talking about it after the fact, like it was and when you walk through the space, it doesn't feel adapted. You don't feel the faces at all.
Nobody is going to feel the challenges I faced designing that space, walking through it, right? Or with the contractor that faced. Nobody's going to remember that or whatever because it's seamless.
Right, that's the goal. Yeah.
But it was definitely. And one other thing I want to point out in that is I like the partnerships with contractors, and I learned so much from you guys, and I learned so much, because you guys control schedules and all. But since I like to ask questions, and I have always worked with people that are, tolerate that and answer, and I keep an eye open in meetings and all, it helped me understand sequencing a little bit, and then we kind of talked with the contractor to figure out, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Will this work? Or what do we need to refine to keep them operational? Because that's not something we control or can control. Right. But having that partnership with a good contractor helped out in that scenario.
Yeah. Which is a very common problem for healthcare providers. I'm sure all businesses, right? We're growing. We need to expand. We need to update. But we cannot take the days off and forego the revenue to be able to do this while we're paying money out to do it, right? So we run into it all the time. And I've never dug more into, processes and kind of what's involved in every step more than I've done so on those projects. And you learn a lot. And we completed one recently that was, they had 5,000 square feet. They were moving into 8,000 square feet. It's going to be a 13,000 square foot clinic when we're done. Same thing. We had to take some chunks and move around, but leave it functional for them to be able to move in and see patients. And it's a challenge for sure. And to your point, I mean, from a design perspective, right? How do you, and you guys, I think, did it right on that one, keep them separate. We did not on this one, and it was very challenging to figure out how do you get the MEPs in a place that they're functional, right? And especially fire protection, functional,
yes.
and in a place where they'll close you out and let you move.
Or your HVAC. You don't want your construction dust coming into the patient exam rooms, There kind of helps knowing the ACA, ICRA requirements, kind of
absolutely
making sure how you separate those construction zones. So yeah, I thought they're keeping them separate, and we were lucky because they're already two different suites.
Right.
It had separate rooftop units. We were able to do that.
Yeah.
We just saved the electrical panels and moved on.
Yeah.
Data was the one that had to.
Yeah.
We had to make sure the data closet wasn't the first one. That was your final data closet.
Right. Because they need data on this one while you tear up that one, right?
Yeah, the data is definitely one that has huge implications, but doesn't always get the attention that it requires. So yeah, definitely right on that.
Yeah, very sensitive information there. So
where do you guys see healthcare going in the next 5 years or so?
Especially with data, right? What you just said. I think some of the trends that are already there, they are great trends, and you're going to see them more and more. Like, our neighborhood urgent care centers, because it makes it easy for commuters to get to, but it's also not a stressful environment. It's a decentralized unit, so you're not getting to a hospital and all. So that definitely will stay. The trends that are making it more look hospitality, bringing in the hospitality aspect of it, making them warm and welcoming are going to stay. I think manufacturers are going to push the limits on making things voice activated or touchless, for us, especially with post-COVID, to get us into that sanitation environment that we all not just desire, but demand at this point. So we'll see that. What I think is going to be different, though, like the audio-visual is going to be important, right? The data is going to be important because, like a lot of remote check-ins and remote sessions, you need to have those audio-visual needs brought in earlier now because they might need a room with TV and cameras and good speaker settings so they can talk to their patients remotely. And that's happening already. What I think is also going to add up now is AI. Coming into it.
We were talking about that a little bit before we started,
or just small things like our wearables. We're going to start getting notifications, data sent directly to our providers. They can probably enhance our care based on that. They can monitor us remotely, heart patients or whatever else. They can get their ECGs done on their phone. But the doctors can view it real time if needed, nurses, whatever. But they can also provide a good feedback quickly enough with remote sessions. You don't have to go in person. Another thing would be like augmented reality, like going into a space and finding digital senses. My phone tells me where to, or my watch taps me where to turn or where to go, or I get the next, hey, you are next in line, little pop up on my phone. I think those things technology-wise will be incorporated a lot, and that will kind of make it, we still have to keep the human aspect to it, right? Because that's one thing I fear, that, we got to still have people that can greet you and there's somebody for you to answer, especially in the older age population where, they need that. They can't rely. But as the younger population and as we are now getting more and more into the primary healthcare scenarios, I think that will be super important. The other aspect, I think, is we all think holistically. Medicine is holistically now, right? So it's not just going and seeking a diagnosis and getting your medication or prescription for that, but what do I need to do to live a healthy lifestyle? So we see that already with our providers giving us those multi-purpose rooms and a yoga class or some spin class or something integrated to keep us active and healthy. We had a we had a practice that I actually enjoyed working with them. I didn't see that model carried on more, but I think it should, is adding nutrition into the design aspect with kitchens and teaching you how to eat healthy. They'll give you a paper, eat this, but I don't know, I don't know how to make it tasty or what I'm supposed to do. I'm not going to sit there measuring everything.
Right.
So having those nutritional classes inbuilt, having facilities that have multimodal disciplines and specialties in one space would be helpful. Having spaces like a childcare in there, like a small play area for kids while you go see a doctor visit, keeping your kid there might be helpful. Get in the same place, getting your groceries and running those errands at the same time. I also, just lost my train of thought over there. There was something else I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean,
From a design challenge, we do see, like you just mentioned, that facility that expanded to 13,000 square feet, this multidisciplinary environment to try to maximize people's interaction and try to accomplish many things at the same time. But what's happening with that is some healthcare providers are going into large, big box retail spaces that are not your typical inline storefront. So the challenge there is when you go into a big box and you chop it into 100 smaller rooms and you only have 5 windows in the whole space that are facing the front, how to break down the space in a way that's efficient for the provider, but that is practical for the user, and where you're just not aware that you may be
in a warehouse.
In this warehouse. So that's a fun design challenge, and we keep finding ways to again spaces get judged very face value, what you first see and that first impression, but ultimately how they function and the ease of getting from point A, B, C and navigating through the facility to be able to enhance that experience is what will be remembered further on.
Yeah. It's almost, with the onset of technology and not onset, the increase in technology, right? Everything's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the space needed is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But I think, you guys touch on a good point. I think it's important that as that technology takes more of a role in the healthcare, that we keep the human aspect and we equally as much push the hospitality aspect,
Absolutely.
right? To keep that human aspect. And I think that's what we see, to your point, the onset, a lot more of the centralized healthcare, right? Not your 500,000 square foot tower, but your 20,000 square foot neighborhood.
Yes.
It's like that gym mentality.
Care.
Like you got to have a gym within 3 to 5 miles of where people work and live, and have that be the go-to for these types of facilities. Yeah.
I also see a lot of like behavioral and healthcare is going to be incorporated in our private providers' offices as well. That is gaining the attention that it needed. So I think that would be a component these days, where we might just have consultation rooms. We do those on oncology centers and all, where you're trying to, where they're having to have consultations, but I think that'll be seen in your primary care providers as well, rather than having your exam table and computer table setting. You should have a few rooms that provide that soft seating and provide the service there.
Yeah, no, I think that would be great.
Yeah, well, this conversation has been great. We can talk to you guys for hours. I know
might have to do an episode too.
Yeah, follow up in the future. But again, thank you guys for coming in and talking to us for a little bit here. What's a good place, a website, a phone number, social media where people can find you?
Groharch.com.
Groh, J-R-O-H, Arch for architecture. So JROHARCH.com. Will be where you can get our information. But if we had to leave any listeners with a final thought, would be, don't cheat the design process. Take a step back and give it the value that it will bring to the project. And the second aspect is it's a team effort. You cannot do this just with a architect or designer. You need to have your general contractor in check in place, or things get out of hand and out of budget in a hurry. So it works best to put the whole team in place at the very beginning, and that way the process can be much smoother and the outcome much better.
What I would summarize would be, like provide careful thought to all your needs and wants would be your number one thing. Share these with your architects. Plan for flexibility and future needs. Get a general contractor on board and the early on in your design process. And the last one would be start sooner than you think you need to.
It always takes a little longer than expected,
Yes.
right?
Definitely.
There's a lot of pieces that need to fall in place to get to a point where you have a center you can turn over and operate in.
Absolutely.
For sure. Awesome.
Thanks so much for having us. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank
awesome.
you guys.
Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah.